Today, we're going to be talking about a function's domain and range. Right? And every function has a domain. A domain is simply what are all the x's? So all the x's are the domain, and the range is simply what are all the y's? Okay. If you get confused about which one's which, what I do is I realize they're in alphabetical order. Domain D comes before R in range, and X in the alphabet comes before Y. So if you just remember that domain D comes before R range, then domain goes with X, which comes before Y. And so we can use this now to figure out what are the domain and range of various relationships, including functions. Okay? So let's look at this one over here. Okay? We'll look at the domain first, the domain of this one over here. Whoops. Okay, the domain is the smallest x ever is -4. And the biggest x ever is, when I look at it, is 4. And -4, x has to be bigger than that, because right here, that's an open circle. X can't be -4. It can be as close as you want, 3.99999, as many nines as you want, but it can't actually get there. So x is going to be bigger than -4, but less than or equal to 4, because right here there's a solid dot. So 4 is counted. If we're asking what are all the x's we can get, 4 is a possibility. -4 is not. But it's between those two, so we show the domain as -4 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 4, or x is between -4 and 4, but not including -4, but yes, including 4. Okay? And this is called, in notation terms, in domain notation, you can write domain and range in two different ways, and the first one is called the inequality method. You can write them as an inequality. And that's what this one is right here. This is an inequality. The second way we can do it is what's called the interval method. And with the interval method, all I do is I write, well, what's the smallest number it can be? In this case, so the interval method, I'll do it right here. I write the smallest number, in this case it's -4. I put a comma. And I write the biggest number, in this case that would be 4. And then I have two different symbols that I use. In the interval method, you use a bracket if I want to include the point. So in other words, if it is a solid dot. I use parentheses if I want to not include the point. So in other words, if it is a open like that. So for this one, to show what the interval method is, for the -4, I don't include it. So I would use a parenthesis. For the 4, I do want to include it. So I would do a bracket. Okay. So we have now shown the domain of this one over here. We've shown it two different ways. The inequality method, -4 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 4. And the interval method, which is saying the same thing, not including -4 all the way to 4, but including 4. That's the domain. For the range, let's do the same thing. For the range for inequality, let's see, what's the smallest y ever gets? It looks like y gets to -4 and gets all the way up to 4. And once again, the 4, it counts, and the -4, you can't quite get there. So it turns out that the range in this particular one is exactly the same as the domain. That the inequality method would say that we have to be bigger than -4, but not including it, and it's y, so I'm going to put a y there, and that is less than or equal to 4. And the interval method would be the same thing. Don't include -4, but do include 4. Okay, let's do this one over here. For this one here, I'll do it in a different color so we don't get confused. First of all, we have to find the domain. And again, I'll do it two different ways. What's the smallest x is? X looks like it goes to -7. So -7. So I'm going to do this the inequality. I don't have to write that anymore. You guys know what they are. Okay, so it goes to -7. And it includes -7 because I've got my, it's an open thing there. So -7 is less than or equal to, because it can be -7, x. And what's the highest x goes to? X goes all the way to over here, 6. So it goes to 6. And x has to be less than 6, and it looks like, oh, that's a solid dot. So yes, it can actually be 6. So the answer would be greater than or equal to, I'm sorry, less than or equal to 6. Doing this exact same thing in the interval method, that would just be -7, comma 6, and it includes both of those, so I'm going to put them in brackets. That's the domain. For the range, what's the highest y goes to? Or sorry, the lowest y goes to? It looks like it comes all the way down here to -7. And what's the highest y goes to? It goes up here and then goes down up here again. Okay, it looks like it goes all the way to 4. Okay. And y has to be greater than or equal to -7, because again, this one is a closed dot, so -7 does count, so it's less than or equal to -7. And up to here, it actually does hit 4, so y has to be less than or equal to 4, because again, this point right here, 4 is a value for y because it is closed. And so doing this on the interval method, that would just be, I'll do it over here, -7, comma 4, and it includes the -7, and it includes the 4.